vagus nerve, the right side vagus nerve, and that goes from the reproductive organs up to the center of the brain to the pineal gland. And so they say that Yin Qi emanates out of the pineal gland through the vagus nerves. And then it goes out of the eyes through the sympathetic nervous system. So when we emit Qi out of the body, that's actually our sympathetic nervous system. And this is all just on psychic energy because you've separated out your Yang Qi to your Yin Qi. So if you're doing Tantra, basically the biophotons are going out of the laser energy, but it's a weak intensity because it's just psychic. And so the frequency of the light is like the carrier wave. So most guys, if they're doing this high battery, that's actually their lower frequency. So that's they know how their intention, what's called in Daoism, is still the Qi is what powers the light. And so that's still stuck in the lower body. And so that's why the chakras are based on the frequency. Since the Yin Qi is it's also it's actually subharmonic. So for example, there's this phenomenon these guys are subcultures. Which activates their lower body vagus nerve, and so that's the subharmonic. And you can do that from that's the Earth's energy also, and so it pulsates at 7 to 9 times per second, and that is the Yin Qi energy, and so. This is like what we would call sensuality in the West, or psychic encounter. But modern Westerners, we don't understand what causes the attraction or lust. And so the reason is that for the male, when they climax, as Professor Robert Sapolsky, their body switches from the parasympathetic vagus nerve to the sympathetic nervous system, and it's initially pre-triggered by the sympathetic nervous system as lust, but then the attraction is the vagus nerve. And the problem is since the males can't stay in the vagus nerve, then they switch back to stress as a sympathetic nervous system. So the male has to use the standing exercise, the trance dance, or you have to stand with the knees, the thighs, and muscles have to be sore. And that way you can reverse the pre-trigger of your sympathetic nervous system as lust. You can reverse it by having this shaking medicine with your bare feet against the earth, or just standing with your knees bent, and that will do an exorcism, a psychic exorcism of that low frequency trigger. And then you can increase the biophoton signal back into the blue light, which is the Yang Qi. And so again, the pineal gland is converting the blood to the cerebrospinal fluid, and that's lecithin, which is also the main male uses as lecithin. That's why I say eat eggs and feeding the brain, because it's lecithin. Or soybeans are also lecithin. That's why the Buddhist monks eat lots of tofu, which is soybeans. So then what happens is you can use up your yang qi, which is and so when you have attraction, what you're doing is you're creating triggers. It causes the energy to flow down the spine, and so you use the sort of the bone, it's a cerebrospinal fluid. And so you just keep, it's the right side vagus nerve, so it's the right side part back down the reproductive, and that goes to the prostate for the male. And so he just keeps using it up, and eventually that's what causes aging. If you use it up too fast, then you can actually die, and that's the right side vagus nerve to the heart. So you're overusing the heart. So in Daoism, the lungs cause sadness or their courage. So if when you have a deep vagus nerve activation, that's driving action, because the lung energy is the Hun Soul. So that's your Yang Qi and Yin Qi, and it powers the heart for the increased blood to the heart. And so the heart is the love, the attraction. It means that the Yang Qi belongs to them, and you can take it to the Wan Qi level if you keep doing that in Tantra, which is the staying power. And then you just send the energy out of the skull, and then eventually that goes in a line through the Wan Qi energy, and it's a real love. And there doesn't have to be any kind of physical connection for that to happen. And that can then induce visions like a life renewal. And I had that happen to me in the 90s. I had my whole life. It's not chronological as in linear time, but it's psychological, like what happened to you that unblocked a previous psychological